It all started with silences. My husband used to fill every room with laughter, but now he just sits there, staring at nothing. His eyes dark, like he's somewhere else, somewhere I can't reach. I called his name, waved my hand in front of his face, and sometimes he'd blink like he was coming back from somewhere far away. I tried to ignore it, to tell myself it was just stress, but every night he seemed further and further from me. Then came the nights where I'd wake to find him gone from bed. I'd get up, heart pounding, and find him in the living room, whispering things I couldn't understand, strange words, murmured in a voice that sounded wrong, low, guttural, almost angry. I'd ask if he was okay, but his eyes looked right through me, as if he didn't know me at all. After one especially terrifying night, when he looked at me and whispered, "You belong to me now," I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. We finally went to see Dr. Williams, a therapist who'd come highly recommended. She was calm, confident, like nothing could shake her. I remember sitting there, waiting for her to tell me it was just stress, that he was just going through a phase. But when my husband started talking, her face went pale. He described visions of shadows around him, whispering things he couldn't understand, voices telling him I was the enemy. He said he felt something crawling inside him, something that wouldn't let go. Dr. Williams took a deep breath, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. She closed her notebook, looked at us, and said, "I don't think this is something I can help with." She hesitated before speaking again. "I think you may need to see someone who deals with spiritual matters." Her voice trembled, and she handed me the contact information for a priest. The next day, we met with Father Marcus. The church was cold, echoing, and he greeted us with a quiet kindness that almost made me break down. I poured out everything: how my husband wasn't himself, how he'd begun acting like someone or something else was inside him. Father Marcus listened intently, nodding as I spoke, his expression darkening. When my husband tried to explain, he started laughing, this hollow, awful sound that filled the church. Father Marcus whispered a prayer, and my husband flinched, his face twisting with anger I'd never seen before. That's when I knew, this thing, whatever it wasn't him. Father Marcus agreed to help, but he warned us. He said exorcisms are dangerous, that sometimes the entity fights back. But I didn't care. I would do anything to get my husband back. The night of the exorcism was the longest of my life. We sat in the cold of the church basement, candles flickering, the smell of incense thick in the air. My husband sat in the center of the room, bound to a chair. His eyes were dark, his face twisted in a cruel smile that wasn't his. I watched in horror as Father Marcus began the rite, his voice steady and unwavering, even as the room grew colder and the lights flickered. My husband's laughter turned to screams, his body thrashing against the bindings as if something inside him was fighting to break free. He looked at me with those eyes that weren't his, and snarled, "You're too late. He's mine now." Father Marcus kept going, his voice growing louder, the words echoing off the walls. My husband's body convulsed, his screams tearing through me, but I couldn't look away. I held on to the hope, the desperate hope that this would bring him back. Then, just as quickly as it began, it stopped. My husband went limp, his head hanging forward, his breathing shallow. Father Marcus whispered a final prayer, and for a moment, everything was still. I rushed to my husband, feeling his pulse, looking for any sign that he was himself again. He opened his eyes, and for the first time in weeks, I saw him, really saw him. He was exhausted, but he looked at me with love, with the recognition I'd been longing for. Tears filled my eyes as I held him, whispering, "You're back. You're finally back." But in the silence as I held him, I felt a chill run down my spine. A voice, low, faint, whispered from somewhere deep inside him, "I'll be waiting." And as always, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for more original horror stories.